Teacher Fellows podcast. My name is Ryan Rarick, and I am an education pathway teacher in Washington County School District. I am joined by my colleague and friend and 2020 Utah Teacher of the Year, Lauren Merkley. Lauren, it's the day after daylight savings time. Are you fully rested?
I don't mind daylight savings time the way everybody else does. I don't know. I'm from the cold Midwest. I went to school in the cold upstate New York. I don't mind it getting darker earlier. So I'm well rested. I welcome winter.
Logically, I was opposed to it, but then after last week where we had Halloween and then the day after Halloween, and then we got an extra hour of sleep this weekend, I was in love with it. Anyway, we have an awesome guest today. Tell us about him.
We're joined today by a teacher fellow and a friend whose name is Sam Noyce. Sam teaches band, orchestra, choir, and French immersion in Kearns, Utah, about 5 minutes from where he grew up. This is a fun fact. He is a Grammy-nominated music educator, which we'll have to get into that, and a recipient of the 2021 Granite School District Excel Award. I am in Granite District, and I know that's a very prestigious award. He advocates for joyful, creative, loud, and culturally sustaining public education, and it is so nice of him to be here with us today. So, Sam, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Sam, we're excited to have you. And before we get into the interview, I do want to give our audience a heads up. We're doing a slightly different format. We're trying to stay a little bit more focused, streamlined. Lauren and I are both English teachers, so we like to have a structure to the work that we do. We're going to have some hard cuts. Our intro's 5 minutes, and I'm running close to that right now after we play our info drop. But our guest interview is going to be 15 minutes. So even if we're like mid-thought, you might hear us just wrap up pretty quickly and then move on to our final thoughts. So I just wanted to give our listeners a heads up about that. Before we get into today's episode, let's get a preview of what we're going to cover and what our topic is from the one and only John Arthur.
Teachers want to know, if I don't teach in the traditional content area like math or language arts, can I still be a teacher leader? Yes, absolutely yes. Check it out. Teacher fellow Chad Warnick, Utah's 2023 Teacher of the Year, teaches agricultural education and serves as his school's Future Farmers of America advisor. Mark Daniels, 2022 Utah Teacher of the Year, teaches theater. And teacher fellow Sam Noyce teaches junior high band, orchestra, and French. These are three of the top teacher leaders in our state, and they've all had to advocate and hustle throughout their whole careers just to secure funding and support for the programs they run. For teacher leaders who specialize in non-core subjects, advocacy and inspiration are part of their job description. They're experts in encouraging students to take risks, emphasizing the process over the end product, fostering a sense of belonging among our kids, and helping other teachers do the same. So if there's this teacher in your art department or gym or career and technical education, and you know they're an incredible teacher leader just waiting to happen, send them the next episode of the Teacher Fellows podcast and let them know their time is now.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And our 15-minute block starts right now. So Sam, as we heard from John's info drop, he talked about how it's still possible to be a teacher leader even if you're not a core subject teacher. And from your impressive bio, teach 4 different content areas: orchestra, band, choir, and French. Tell me about your experience being a teacher leader or an instructional leader as an elective teacher. Is that something you feel like has come easy? Do you feel like you've been overlooked? Are you able to collaborate? Just tell me your general thoughts about that.
Great question. Really interesting thing to delve into. I think of myself much more as an instructional learner than as an instructional leader. I approach my interactions with other teachers expecting that they always have something valuable to teach me, no matter what their subject area or the differences between our subject areas. And so far, that's always been true. I spend a lot of time during my prep period going and visiting and observing other teachers who inspire me, no matter the subject. I am a full-time classroom teacher, so I'm not a instructional coach or admin role or anything like that. I think that in most schools, your instructional leaders are those teachers who are still in the classroom. So you find ways to draw on that capacity and build it throughout your whole staff by drawing on the strengths of those teachers. My school leader does a great job of this. He's established a culture where It's just the norm to have people popping into your classroom. It's non-evaluative. It's a way to celebrate what each other are doing. That really helps you see that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to great instruction. We all have our own personal preferences and our own skills, but inspiring teachers run the gamut of different styles: project-based learning, even lecture-based instruction. Some inspire deep love just because of their connection with their content area, but others just have this ability to connect with students regardless of the subject matter. Great teaching, it's a peculiar sort of magic. It resists a singular definition, but you know it when you experience it.
For sure. I think of it like a great recipe. You can make lots of different food with a lot of different ingredients, and the food all tastes good, even though it's very different, right? Something you said right there, that being an instructional learner, I love that idea. By the way, that's like a point of emphasis for the teacher leaders or the teacher fellows, is that teacher leaders don't have to have these predefined roles of being a learning coach or an instructional coach or an administrator, but you can be a leader by being a classroom teacher. And like you said, that's actually something that we see frequently. Out of curiosity, what's something like, I know when I became a learning coach, when I went and watched the band, choir, orchestra teacher, I was blown away with the skills and abilities that they had. What do you think is something that if a teacher in a different content area came and watched you teach, or any band or orchestra teacher, what's something that we could learn from watching you teach?
I think band teachers are really special. Music teachers are really special. I don't know for me, but for the music teachers that I know, you take band directors, they're teaching anywhere from 6 to 14 instruments at one time, usually with somewhere between maybe 40 to 75 kids in the classroom, and they're all in there at the same time. It's a knee-buckling task. It is a lot to take on. I don't pretend to have all the answers for it, but I think that what great music teachers do have is an ability to prioritize connection and to see students not only for who they are now, but also for who they can become. I think that music teachers are exceptionally skilled at also building up student leaders who can then teach and inspire their peers.
I will say, Sam, I taught at Cottonwood High School in Granite District. I don't know if you know Amber Tuckness. Shout out Amber Tuckness.
Shout out Amber Tuckness, my band director.
Stop! Oh my God.
Amber Tuckness is the reason that I became a music teacher.
She's the reason for all the seasons. And what you're saying, I've never observed you in the classroom, but I observed that keenly with Amber. She has built, it's not only band or choir, but it is a community. It is a place of belonging. And there's so many opportunities for student leadership. So I have seen that skill play out. And I have no doubt that as one of Amber's acolytes, you are carrying on that legacy. That's so amazing.
Yeah, she's really special. You just always knew when you're talking to Amber that she's listening, because she makes that eye contact with you. She remembers your name. She uses your name. She'll get really intense in rehearsal, but then she backs that up with an intense connection.
I have no doubt you are exemplifying those same characteristics in your role. I have no doubt. And I wanted to ask you something also in your bio that may connect to these ideas of connection and belonging that you were saying band teachers have an ability to foster. In your bio, you said that you're an advocate for what you called culturally sustaining education. And I'd love to know, I think I have a vague idea maybe of what that phrase means, but I'd love to know how you define that and really how you see that playing out specifically in your content areas. What are the levers that you pull to do that in your classroom?
Yeah, sure. Culturally sustaining pedagogy means teaching and learning that fosters and grows the strengths of our students and their communities, rather than focusing on their perceived deficits. It centers our students' ways of being in both what is taught and how it is taught. Something I do is I try to help my students tell their own stories, allow my students to tell their own stories. So we do a lot of really creative work in my band room. We're not just replicating the great masterworks. My students are songwriting. They're creating beats. One of the most important things that I do all year is I have my students create a playlist of their songs, their music. And that's not only to play over our speakers in the classroom, it's also to help us design and co-create a curriculum together, because I believe that my students have complex musical lives before they ever enter my classroom. And it's really important for me to value that as worthy of rigorous academic study. So the songs they put in their playlist, we're going to be performing these songs. We're going to be using these, drawing musical concepts out of that. It's something that's ongoing, and it's something that allows students to take the lead and to see their identities radically valued in the classroom in a way that they not always have been.
Oh, Sam, I love that response. It gave me chills. And I love what you said about co-creating the curriculum, which I think is particularly visible and able to be observed in a band classroom, because whatever you pick, it is only coming to life through the participation of these dozens of kids and these dozens of instruments, this sort of community explosion of sound. So you're doing that as a band teacher anyway, and I think you've layered on top of it these entry points for students' identity. I play piano. I want to be in your band.
Come on down. Come on
Okay,
down.
great.
We'll have a great
Okay,
time.
great.
Sam, I'm out of curiosity. I'm wondering, I love this idea and this concept of centering student experiences with both what is taught and how it is taught. I imagine that for many students, and I think you even mentioned this, it's a new experience for them, right? Because in other courses, the curriculum may be predetermined and everybody's going to learn it the same way year after year. I'm wondering, does that ever become a complication for some of your students? Like, I'm trying to think of my own experience as an English teacher and now as an education teacher, when I've tried to do something I thought of as like revolutionary, where it's like, I'm going to create a menu of options and I'm going to let my students choose the way that they want to demonstrate their learning. I get a ton of kids that default back to what they're used to. That it's like just easier for them to do the thing that they've always done. And it's not necessarily what they want to do. So I'm curious, do you run into that? And what techniques, if you do run into it, how do you overcome it? And if you don't run into it, what techniques are you utilizing to avoid that?
Yeah, this is really interesting to think about. I think you mentioned a really powerful technique there with giving students a menu of options, but they will tend to, as human beings, we tend to what's familiar. When you're in the school setting, you're used to doing certain things a certain way, especially if they have a band teacher before or something like that. I think one of the most powerful tools that we have is students co-teaching. So one thing that we do, and this comes from Dr. Chris Emden, this idea of co-generative dialogues. So you'll bring together 4 different students that represent kind of different parts of your class, maybe a really engaged student, a less engaged student, maybe students from different backgrounds, right? And you'll talk about what's working really well in the class, or especially what would they like to change, right? When you do those discussions about your class, and then the students see you implement the changes that they recommend, then they're like, oh, he really means it. He's really serious about our voice. And then that becomes opportunities then for students to start co-teaching with you. Out of those discussions come, a student will be really excited about this certain idea. Why don't you teach it? Show the class how you would do it. Students catch on if you're really serious about elevating student voice in your classroom. They see it and it becomes something really special. It won't always be the same every year. Some classes will its own way.
I love how it's like a slow build, maybe, that they have to see it. They have to see that you're serious about it. And it's like a little bit of that consistency and that follow-up. I don't know if you've ever seen this video, and people listening should look it up. There's like a YouTube video. I actually think we saw it at a Teacher Fellows convention. It's called Starting a Movement. It's these people at a concert, and they're just all sitting on the grass, and one dude just gets up and starts going crazy. And at first, everybody thinks that dude's weird. But then another dude, the first follower, shows up. And as soon as the first follower shows up, it's moved from being weird to being something that looks fun. All of a sudden, it's a snowball effect. Before you know it, the whole crowd is up, dancing around like crazy. I think what you're explaining right there is one of the concepts of teacher leadership is being a lead or mentor teacher. You mentioned at the beginning of this, going around and seeing other teachers teach and figuring out what you can take from them is something that you like to do. And I think that what you just explained is a revolution. We don't need to install like a whole new pedagogy or a whole new curriculum to have like meaningful change happen in school. We can do something like what you just said right there and ask questions and listen to what the students say and then make adjustments. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you've got the whole crowd dancing. I think that's pretty awesome, Sam.
You mentioned how sometimes like you'll have this great idea and then you bring it into the class. You think it's going to be revolutionary, but it kind of falls flat. I think that This gets into one of the pitfalls when you talk about truly relevant pedagogy or sustaining pedagogy. One of the traps is to fall into assuming what the students are going to like or what they're going to really be excited about. You said it right there. The key is just ask questions. Ask questions. Keep on asking them rather than assuming that you know what's going to connect with students.
I think that is such a beautiful way to end, because you began by talking about how you see yourself as an instructional learner. You feel that you most comfortably inhabit. And then to end with this sort of other perch of curiosity, I think is such a beautiful demonstration of what makes you so special as a teacher and what makes you special as a leader and as a learner, because what you've described here is incredible. I mean, it sounds like a truly special for those kids to be in. And I hope that the other teachers at your school are getting an opportunity to observe you and to borrow and to adapt some of these philosophies that lived in your classroom. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Hey, we have to say this very cute thing. Don't they call you Mr. Noise or Mr. Noisy?
Oh, yeah, they do that all the time. That's
I
for
think
sure.
it's
Yeah.
just the sweetest thing for a band teacher to be called Mr. Noise. Everybody, are you with us? Yeah, so I just thought that was the sweetest little anecdote about you.
All right. Our 15-minute block is up and maybe a little bit more. And Sam, we want you to stick around, but Lauren and I are going to talk about some of our reflections and takeaways, and we might have you jump in here as if we need some clarification. Lauren, I'm going to pass the ball to you. What are some of the things that stuck out to you from what Sam shared with us?
The first thing that's this very tender thing close to my heart, when he was talking about this memory of a class that I had maybe 3 years ago. It was a second period class, and it was a smaller class than my other classes. And somehow, one day, one kid just asked me to play a song during the minute when everybody's coming in at the end of passing period. So I said, sure, like I'll play this song. And it just sort of organically caught on. And so every day, a new student, they would send me a song and the title, and I would play it before the next class. And then the first minute of class, a kid would explain that song and why they chose it. And then we made this big class playlist at the end. And it only happened in this one class because it was so like student driven, organic. I didn't do anything. It happened. But it just made me think of what Sam was talking about. That class, still to this day, I think that's in my top 5 most bonded classrooms. I think it's because there was this way for kids to share this tiny piece of their identity and get 1 minute like this band. People got introduced to new bands and we had all this variety. I got a little jealous listening to Sam because I think music has this power. And I'm an English teacher and I believe deep power of language and words. I've staked my whole career on it. But there's something sort of different that's happening with music that is connective and uniting. I don't really have anything to say other than Sam made me think of the special experience that music and what he would call culturally sustaining education sort of brought about. I'm like grateful thinking about those kids.
To go off of what you're saying right there is this concept. I think I might be overgeneralizing for a lot of people, but I do think I've experienced time as an instructor coach. And we're tying this back to leadership. Sam is showing us he's leading from within and not always from ahead, not always telling people what to do, but asking them to, and then building the support structures to allow that to happen. I think that's really scary for teachers who aren't familiar with that, because that means that you might be surrendering some control, or at least the perception that you're surrendering some control. I'm thinking when I was talking to Sam, I asked him like, hey, do you ever have this challenge where kids just default back to the norm? But what I didn't share is the other side of that, where when I gave this menu of options, I had a book project that I would do every quarter when my English class, and it kind of got stale. I got pretty tired of reading the same book project. I let kids pick their book, and that's what I thought was me being revolutionary, is they can read whatever they want, but they still all had to do the same project, and I got tired of it. But I decided to do this menu of options, and the last option was, you pitch an idea to me. You tell me how you're going to show me that you understood the content of this book. I had students performing interpretive dances, filming themselves, and then writing more paragraphs explaining the movement of the dance and what it meant than any writing assignment I gave them. I'm not musically inclined. I love to sing. Nobody else loves that I sing. I had this student who composed an original song after he read The Diary of Anne Frank and then performed it on the piano and recorded himself. It blew me away. And this was a kid that it was AP Lang and Comp. And he struggled with writing. And that's not typically a class that you take when you struggle with writing. This was an outlet that is all critical thinking that you had right there. So what I'm taking away from this is for every one of those stories, there were also a dozen stories of kids that tried to find the easy way out, right? That tried to do like the bare minimum and get the assignment done and turn it in. I would never have seen the greatness without opening the door of that possibility. So with what you're talking about right there, Lauren, it's the same thing. The kids were bonded. But my biggest takeaway right here is I think when we think of leadership, sometimes we're always thinking of the head of the organization. I think there's a lot of different ways to lead. And what Sam's modeled right here is like asking how people want to be led is something incredibly powerful. I think that's an untapped resource, is ask our students enough what they want sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think in John's info drop, he mentioned people are asking, can non-core teachers lead? I think the non-core teachers are these sort of pockets of magic, that there are things happening in choir, in band, even in our like TV broadcasting section, in the arts studio, that are actually not happening in the rest of the school. I think to take band, for example, Ryan and I talked about this last week, extracurriculars like band or theater or choir, there are real stakes to the work kids are doing in those classrooms because there's going to be a band performance, right? Or they're going to perform the school play or produce the school newspaper. That unity of purpose is so infused in any of our electives that just simply is much harder to conjure in a math class or even in a language arts class. Core teachers actually would stand so much from elective years because also, if you talk to kids, that's the stuff they're bringing up, right? I love my debate class. I am obsessed with my band class. Those are the classes they're dying to go to because there's some magic there. There's some unity. There's some like radical validation and of culture, like Sam was talking about. And there's stakes, right? Like it matters. And I just think, wow, how could core teachers really lean on the leadership and the pedagogical sort of experimentation happening in electives?
Well, and to go into some like educational jargon, you've got built-in differentiation and project-based learning and all of that stuff. And our time is winding down, but we're going to absolutely have to have Sam come back because we didn't even ask him about his Grammy nomination that we need to figure out.
Okay, part 2, full Grammy story.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. That's all right. It's okay.
Okay, well, we'll just call you. We'll just call you. Mr. Noyce, we're so grateful for you coming and making some noise with us today. This was such a delight to hear from you. To our listeners, please like and subscribe on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Music, Stitcher, or wherever you access podcasts. As you know, we'll be producing these episodes every month. Thanks, as always, to our beautiful captain, Kayla Towner, who is our producer. So from my co-hosts, Ryan Rarick and me, Lauren Merkley, thank you for listening.